Okay. Well, hey, it sounds like we're coming through loud and clear. Hey, Julie, great to have you. To everyone out there watching, welcome to Vantage Ventures Real Talks. If you haven't been able to join before, Vantage is an amplifier of scalable startups in West Virginia, and we're using this Real Talk series to chat with exceptional individuals. We want to talk to them about their why and also how they're doing what they're doing. We're obsessed with entrepreneurs around here, and we spend a ton of time learning about what drives them and how their unique stories have really built them to succeed and bring them to where they are today. Today, we're super excited. I'm super excited to be speaking with Julie Brefczynski-Lewis, who I admit, Julie really got on my radar during kind of the beginning of COVID when quarantine came and there was a lot of talk around the importance of mindfulness and a little more time in our days for some meditation and all these things that had been, in the background of things to do, but really got a lot more attention, and some of her work really surfaced from research at West Virginia University, and I think then it was fascinating to hear about her leap into entrepreneurship with a really exciting technology with a PET scan helmet. And so, thanks for joining us, Julie. We're really excited to chat today.
Oh, thank you, Kelsey. Thanks for that intro. I'm excited to tell my story in case it helps anyone else, because it is a little bit of adventure of, wow, where could this take me? Where could that take me? So I'm eager to chat, and yeah. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's the best kind, where you never know where you're going to end up. But and this is totally a story of that, right? I think a lot of people don't realize how often really the academic and research world can lend itself to really groundbreaking new technology that is meant for, bringing things to the market and exciting new startups. But for a second, I'd like to kind of go back, and if you could tell us where you started and maybe how you ended up at WVU and into the research world in the first place, that would be great.
Oh, sure. I mean, even in first grade, I remember people would go around the class and, say, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And everyone knew. They would say it in unison, a scientist. That was my thing. And so, research science it just never left my mind. At one point I kind of wanted to, maybe environmental or biological, but I went sort of the course of neuroscience. I just became fascinated with the brain. And so I did the whole route of academia, which is generally, you get your undergraduate degree, and after that you go to graduate school, you do a postdoc or two, and then end up looking for a faculty position. And so my husband first got a position here at WVU, and I obviously tried to get so I could live in the same city, yeah. Which is something in academia that is, a concern for a lot of people. And so I had a really unique route. I was interested in the brain and how consciousness worked. And then all of a sudden in my personal life, I was just like, oh, if you, do meditation, you could kind of find out from an experiential sense how your mind is working, right? You're turning inward in a way. And so those things used to be in two separate worlds. I was in my graduate work studying the brain of people who were attending to visual objects in the field and watching basically like a spotlight of attention moving around. So they would be, their eyes would be in one spot, and you could look in their brain and actually see what they were looking at just by, there's sort of a map in the back of the brain of the visual world. And I could just look at a brain and say, oh, they're looking over here in the right upper quadrant, and it was pretty cool. And I would see how it was controlled and how the level of control kind of from the frontal and parietal would kind of exert its influence on visual cortex or auditory cortex. And then I had done some retreat experience with the meditation. I really was getting into that as sort of my hobby, as it were. And then all of a sudden, it used to be that meditation research was a little fringy. There had been some really shoddy research done in the 70s and 80s that was just, giving people pen and paper tests and saying, well, did the meditation help you? And of course, people are like, yeah. They were terrible studies, and it got a very bad reputation. And then it became a little bit of a blacklisted topic. And Richie Davidson in Madison had a postdoc position studying how attention worked in meditation. And I'm like, whoa, this is kind of a combination of exactly what I was interested in my academic domain and what I've been looking at with mindfulness. And he told me when I entered in kind of the interview, when I was interviewing, he's like, entering this field could ruin your entire career. Is what he.
Really? Yeah. We'll talk about give you pause. I mean, right.
But it didn't, and it actually really took off, and I think they were very. I have a parrot, and occasionally if I get excited, he's going to get excited. Home quarantine life is real.
Amazing. It's like instead of a laugh track, we have like an enthusiasm track with the parrot. I love it.
I might have to go grab him and have him and participate. 1 second. I know we may have too much audio. Okay, so here he is.
Hello, what's his name?
This is Nike Bird. He actually says Nike Bird. You want to say it? No. Okay. So anyway, I was in and then I sort of expanded my horizons to social cognition, to compassion meditation, which is a different kind of, different types of meditation practice. And I had this faculty position, and part of my role at West Virginia University was to be a liaison to other people wanting to do neuroimaging of any sort, whether it was MRI, PET, EEG, which is the electrodes on the brain versus, doing the full brain scans. And I met a PET physicist named Stan Majewski who had a piece of paper on his bench top that was a patent drawing. And it was a drawing of a wearable brain scanner. And it showed a woman jogging on a treadmill with a brain scanner on her head. Now, the holy grail in neuroscience, and especially social and affective neuroscience, is being able to do what's called ecologically valid experiments, being able to study someone doing something real, instead of imagining walking down the street and having your brain scan, you're actually walking, or imagining, interacting socially with someone, making eye contact like I'm with you sort of through the camera. These are all really part of our lived experiences, and everything that's done with brain research scans is a little bit compromised by the technology. And I'm like, wow, this is wonderful. Do you have this device? Oh, no, it's just a kind of a thought. It's something that I thought, I'll stick a little patent on it, and if something happens, it happens. And so we made it happen.
I love that.
We built the first prototype, and then we kind of expanded it, and so we've had multiple prototypes now, and tested on real people. It works, and even had somebody walking on a treadmill. We've actually done the study, and so we made the piece of paper come to life.
I was going to say, so what was the time period?
Really, it started 2011, 2012. So it took some years to get to the treadmill, which was last summer was the treadmill.
Yeah.
So, and then there's also another version that's bedside, so we can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that you said just a couple things that, hit me right away. I mean, right, that idea of we made it happen, it was a drawing, and then it was kind of this just, scratched idea on the back of a piece of paper, and then all of a sudden here it is, and and someone just decided, let's do it. There's nothing, why just dream about it? Let's put, rubber to the pavement here and make it happen. And that is just the total hallmark of entrepreneurism, is just that decision of, well, why not? Why shouldn't I just do it then? And let's just get it, let's get the job done. So that's amazing. But a piece of me wants to even ask you kind of further back, as it sounds like you're developing this interest in neuroscience, and science is always kind of a calling and a total curiosity point for you. And then in your, personal life and developing meditation techniques and getting interested in that. This idea of bringing the two together, if you don't mind speaking to that. I mean, I think a lot of people wonder, should I, or are careers where you're kind of pursuing and bringing in some of those personal passions, is that a good idea or not? And then then you get faced with a faculty member saying, this could ruin your career. This is a risk. So how did you approach that, and how did you think about it, or have the confidence and clearly decided to continue with it?
I don't know. Maybe I just always like to be a little bit on the edge. And I think that if you have that quality in you, then you have to do it. There wasn't even I should ponder it sensation at all when I heard that. Like, no, this is of course where I should be. And so I feel like, part of it is just having a little bit of, I don't know, maybe a sense of adventure, but also a sense of like, I'm not, if it doesn't work, I feel like there are other things that one could fall back on. So there's a little bit of security necessary in order to make those kind of leaps. So I do realize that there's some kind of privilege associated with that. But I mean, if you feel like you want to do something and then you settle for something that's kind of a little bit safer, and you maybe are okay enough to be able to take that risk, I think you would regret it. And you would regret the loss of that adventure and the what could have been sense. I definitely say go for it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And clearly it brought you to where you are today. So, and I'm sure though it wasn't kind of easy at every turn. And I wonder, as you were kind of in the world of studying this combination, thinking about meditation and neuroimaging, what have been some of the most surprising or exciting moments in those pursuits?
Oh, I mean, in some ways, the most exciting thing, and I mean, I've actually slept in a lab when the computers used to be a little more slow, just to be able to kind of be there when the data processing is finished and get that first look. So to me, that's always like the joy of science, is that you see like, oh, did it work? Can you actually see from graduate school onward, can you see that attention moving around in the brain? Could you predict, oh, wow, you can see it. Look, there it is. That sense of amazement. The other amazing thing, and this is going back to that meditation research study. We had these experts come in to Madison. They were from all over the world. They were long-term meditating monks and nuns and lay people who had done at least 10,000 hours of retreat practice. And that's a magic number in expertise research, but it's a lot. I mean, a lot of them have done it by doing a 3-year completely closed retreat. That was the most common. So these are really kind of amazing people. And one of the things we were trying to do is look at, well, does that expertise matter? So we were trying to look at a correlation with the amount of practice, because some had, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, and even one had 55,000 hours of practice. But every time I tried to run the correlations, it was zilch. Nothing correlated with hours of practice. And one of my colleague, the other postdoc on the project, ordered the biography of one of the research participants in the study. And in that biography, it said he had done 2 3-year retreats. He reported to us that he had done 1 3-year retreat. And all of a sudden, and when we contacted him, like, why did you just tell us 1? And he said, well, you know, that first one wasn't so good.
I wasn't an expert yet, so.
Right. And so all of a sudden we called every single participant, and I found out that like 3 or 4 of them had severely underreported their hours. And when we got the new numbers, perfect correlations with their hours of practice.
Julie, I thought you were about to tell me that I could work on my meditating like this week and be just as good at it and get all the great effects of a 10,000 hour meditator. Come on.
That actually is the first like finding, because when we looked at just like the average, like what the brain kind of looked like, it actually was not very different. Some people had only less than 7 hours of practice. And when you look at their brain, the same areas are active. So really, yeah, it's actually what you just said is true. But if you look at how they interfere, like we distracted them with these sounds like of screaming women and babies and all sorts of things that are supposed to be very like emotional and valent. And when average Joes like myself would hear them, we'd be like, wait, what was that? Like, oh no, I'm supposed to concentrate on this meditation object. And you would get all flustered, and you could kind of see in the brain that was like distracted. But the experts just kind of firmed it up. So those were the areas where you would see the most robust, like you got better at dealing with distraction. You're able to kind of turn on emotion if you're doing compassion, or turn it off if you were doing just the kind of concentration meditation. So I like to say that result because people think, oh, you're going to become like Spock. And if somebody is in emotional distress, you'll say, oh, that's very interesting. I want to remain peaceful. But no, when they wanted to be engaged, they were really emotionally engaged. But then they could also create boundary. I mean, I learned a lot about myself and what was possible just from the brain data that I saw with those experts, you know?
Is there, and I have to ask how, and then I want to totally dive into the pet helmet and everything going on there, but I do, you know, I am just curious. Obviously, everyone has faced such kind of uncertainty and talk about kind of a distracting, stressor-filled world right now. How has just your background and expertise kind of impacted the way you're thinking about this environment and how we're all operating in it?
I really feel, and there's actually, I had an interview early on and was on Inside Appalachia, which was like also I love Inside Appalachia.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this was towards the beginning of the pandemic period, and I really felt, and I still feel today, that the compassion element is probably the most important thing. Like, you're kind of isolated a little more than normal. And maybe feeling moments of anxiety or like, I didn't do anything today, what's wrong with me, or what have you, you know, this self-compassion and also making a connection with others. And that's one thing that's actually purposefully fostered by like the practices of the cohort we studied in Madison. And this is where I want to, maybe it's kind of bridging, to be able to study that in a more like live action context. Like, what if you're actually having a conversation with someone and you go into it having just done compassion meditation? How does that change the interaction? I would love to,
what exactly is compassion meditation?
Compassion meditation is a specific practice where you start with mindfulness, which is that, you know, just kind of focusing on your breathing and centering yourself a little bit. And then you kind of imagine being able to send happiness or a relief of suffering to someone you care about. So you might think of like your mother or your, you know, some loved one. and you wish them happiness, and you kind of imagine them really happy and what they enjoy. Like, let's say, thinking of your grandmother and she really enjoys cooking or what have you. You can imagine them at their happiest playing with grandkids, whatever it is. And then you kind of try to like amplify that feeling, and then you spread it to include yourself, to include strangers, to include the world. And it's just this sense, and even to include difficult people. And I have done this practice, like if you have like some kind of meeting with someone that you might have a little bit of, instead of going into the meeting with this, like, they're going to just be like this, and, I know what they're going to say something about that. Instead, you do this compassion before, and you go into the meeting and you're like, wow, I just imagine them really happy, and I'm happy to see them. And that shows, and it changes the way the interaction goes. It's a really neat pro-social skill development technique, I think. And I think the monks would have done it in kind of a religious context, but there are other institutions like Stanford has a program in Emory, and I'm trying to do that with some of my own research. You can do this in a secular way. You could connect it with a spiritual element if you feel so, but I think it's really a powerful emotion, and maybe overcome some of the strangeness of our video culture that we're having right now. Like, it's a little impoverished, and you can amplify the depth of it through compassion.
That's amazing. Wow, that's really interesting. And I think you're right. I mean, it is. That's something that almost everyone can relate to. This idea of, kind of growing out that good feeling towards maybe especially folks who you're having trouble with. But,
wishing others, like connecting to all the other people having the same kind of, I have a real headache today. May everyone who has a headache feel better. Or, I pretty much, it's 3:00 and I'm still on my couch or something, whatever it is. You know what? I wish compassion to all those people who are kind of confused by the pandemic right now, and
Sure.
I don't know what they're supposed to do.
So absolutely.
It has this ability to kind of, be a little bit flexible and work with whatever kind of day you're having.
Yeah, very, very cool. And so to your point, that then bridges to this idea and kind of what's amazing about something like a pet helmet, where you're not in, I know that just having walked into a hospital, I immediately am in a totally different headspace. Just being in a clinical environment, it can change everything about, your heart rate goes up and you're kind of in just a different place. So being able to kind of get more and more modular and kind of mobile with how we're testing and scanning and looking for things is an obvious appeal. But I think, would you mind talking a bit now about how you went from a drawing to a real physical thing that's now being tested and it's working and it's out there? So just what that process looked like and kind of what the technology really does that's different.
Sure, Kelsey. I think early on we got some internal seed money from the Center for Neuroscience and the West Virginia Clinical Translational Institute. So they supported, kind of our rudimentary development of a prototype. And the timing was just right in that we dovetailed in 2015. And so I guess that's where maybe we started to actually work on it. There was a grant called the Brain Initiative. It was a way to kind of amplify our knowledge and understanding of the brain in all sorts of domains, from cell cultures of neurons all the way up to the human brain. And one of them, there was, different specialties. And one was like new types of imaging technology. And we're like, oh, well, that kind of fits with what we're doing. And we did get a Brain Initiative grant, which was, it was kind of prestigious. We were on the front page of the Washington Post for which was pretty
nice.
cool with us, with our, actually it was even a mock-up of the prototype, just showing that someone might be able to kind of walk around with this device. And so from there's also an idea generation of, well, what else could we do with this? So obviously researchers might be able to study, okay, how's the brain working? But what about medical uses? And that's where we started to think of, well, there are people who are extremely critically ill and they can't move out of their bed, and if they do get moved, it's dangerous for them. And so then we started to think, oh, well, we could adapt a version to come to the bedside. So that's the other development that we also start to work. So now we have multiple prototypes, right? So we have the one where you can walk on a treadmill and walk and talk, and another version that we just got approval for our experiment to do in the intensive care unit. So to work with really critical patients. So this is the conundrum. These patients often undergo, for a variety of reasons, neural events like strokes. And they might even be a little bit in a pre-stage that something could be done. They could experience cooling or certain types of medications that could rescue them from different types of neural events. And the rescues differ depending on the type of neural event. If they have a brain bleed versus, an epileptic event, etc., they sort of need to know specifically what's going on. But the conundrum is moving them to a neuroimaging facility puts them at risk for having a stroke. So finding out whether they're at risk for a stroke puts them at risk for a stroke. And so you can imagine developing some sort of device that could get rid of the added risk would be, something quite necessary. So that's what sometimes that's also where, I hate to say where the money is. So we're
there's
also
huge value. Yeah, I mean, there's
and it's a life-saving potentially as well. So it's really exciting, and whatever develops in that technology world applies to all the versions of the pet helmet that we have. So that's always kind of been our philosophy. Like, let's see what we can do. Where we can, whatever type of aspect or spoke on that wheel we can develop applies to almost all the spokes.
That's exactly, yeah. I mean, that goes back to, again, this idea of, in the entrepreneurial world, it's, finding where there's kind of immediate critical need and value add, and helping really develop that technology in that area. And then it can be, really broadened to apply to a lot of different areas once that, there's a market in a very specific market has been developed. What do how is, obviously, all your background, you have extensive background in research and meditation and all of these kind of areas. How has this kind of adding of the business world kind of come together for you, or how's that process been, shifting to think more oriented in that way?
Oh, sure. I mean, it became, there were presentations from the Office of Tech Transfer related to, hey, you can do something with your research, and working with others in the field, there was that kind of burning sense of like, let's not leave what you're doing in academia in this little theoretical bubble. Let's get it out there and let's get it helping people. Let's get it into the hands of people that can do something about it. And the only way to do that is through entrepreneurship, really. I mean, I think it's probably the most efficient way, but I had no business background. I had a student who worked with me for years as an undergrad, and then he took a year off, Nanda Siva, and before going to med school. And he has an engineering background and is really interested in entrepreneurship, and even eventually for him combining that with his practice of medicine. And so he applied for the NSF I-Corps program. We did the short course, and he applied for us to be in the national I-Corps program. And then there was a government. We were supposed to do it in the winter, and then there was the government shutdown, and and so we ended up doing it last spring. And wow, there was a boot camp that basically gives you this intensive week of training that is then coupled with also a quite intensive, I believe, 7-week online experience. There's a lot of modules, and then you return in person when we used to be able to go places and see people.
Right.
And part of that process was, you had mentioned critical need, finding the critical needs, finding the pain points. Obviously, we had different, we had, kind of no background. We had different versions of the PET helmet that could do different things, even within kind of the medical bedside version. Maybe is Alzheimer's where we should go with this? Is neurocritical care? Is pre-epilepsy surgery? Is the whole field of research and making of, it's the military? There are traumatic brain injury with football players. What do we do with this? And so you have to undergo 100 interviews and they give you instructions on how to do these hopefully unbiased interviews. You don't tell them about your technology. You just ask them, hey, what's wrong? What would you like to do? What are the barriers? And there's where we kind of started to see, like what I described before with the neurocritical care. Oh, gee, we would love to get these images, but you have this quandary of adding risk just to find out if they're at risk, by moving them. And so that's where okay, this is probably the pain point that's one of the most severe. But if you could do screening for Alzheimer's, that also is pretty huge. So, we're trying to stay a little bit light on our feet and develop something that could be used for both. But maybe the first one is related to critical care.
Yeah, absolutely. And what? So I know very little about, I have no medical background, but there are different types of imaging, right? There are different ways, different types of scans, like a PET scan's one, but there are multiple different scans that, I've gone through and people go through. Would you mind just kind of bare basics?
Sure. Yeah, good question.
The benefit of a PET scan, and then maybe the difference between where kind of the PET helmet is then even different from a traditional PET scan. And after you tell us that, I promise I'm going to switch to questions from folks watching. And I'll give a quick plug that if anyone is watching, you can ask questions in the comments and we'll try to get to as many as we can.
Sounds good. So when I started in the field, I actually did more MRIs, and that's where people think of going in a big scanner and, hearing all these boop, 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 beep, 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 beep sounds. And it's basically using, there's a big magnetic field, and then there's radio frequencies that cause the very protons in your brain and body to kind of orient themselves, and whether they're in fat, whether they're in oxygenated hemoglobin, whether your blood is fresh or whether your blood has just been used for metabolic activity, changes how it works. So you can see what parts of your brain are having a rush of fresh blood because it's critical to a task. So if you're walking or imagining yourself walking because you're in an MRI and it's like completely covering your head and you're lying still on your back, and if you move even a few millimeters, it causes problems. But if you're imagining walking, the parts of your brain where you might think about moving your feet in real life might be active. Now, PET is going to give you a pretty similar picture. Here you get a small amount of a tracer that looks at how your blood is using either oxygen or glucose or something related to metabolism. It also has a whole range of, like, your brain is using chemical, neurotransmitters or brain chemicals. And so you've probably heard of dopamine and serotonin. So, like dopamine there's different types of receptors, but there's one, for example, that like is used in craving. So you want that piece of chocolate cake, and while you're sort of craving that piece of chocolate cake, your dopamine neurons are like anticipating the cake, and you can actually see that with PET, and you could see like maybe they get to eat the piece of cake, and all of a sudden there's a release of dopamine or something like that. So you have a little more options in PET. You can get the same kind of thing as MRI instead of using the magnetic field. You're using blood metabolism. It's very similar. But you can add to it, okay, you're looking at dopamine, you're looking at serotonin. Now there's even ones that look at genetic expression. Your genes are constantly being kind of accessed by removing some of these proteins called histones. And you can see like, okay, like let's amp up the hormone. Let's, produce a whole bunch of cortisol, which is stress hormone. So you might be able to see that kind of thing in the brain, which is really interesting. And EEG is looking at brain waves. So our PET helmet does the exact same thing in the sense of what it's looking at as standard PET, but it's lightweight. The modules are made in a different way using a new type of technology, silicon photomultiplier, and allows them to be, instead of like, I remember one of our early partners had been GE, and in one of our meetings, they brought out one of the old, the detectors that are in most scanners, in your local hospital. If you look at your PET scanner, it says, each module is about as big as a really big desktop computer. Like, it takes some oomph. And here each module is, the size of like a cup. And so it's much lighter, and they're trying to make them smaller and smaller, as just like cell phones. Well, they got smaller and smaller until they got bigger and bigger. And then the thing about them, and I guess I'll use my phone as this, when you have a PET scanner in the hospital, the detectors are way far away so that they can scan the entire body of even quite a large person. Because what most of the work of a PET scanner in a hospital is to look for cancer. And so let's say someone has lung cancer, they want to see if it's spreading to any place in the body. So they look at the whole body from head downward, and maybe they have to get the abdomen, they have to get the brain, etc. The PET helmet the detectors are really close to the brain, and so the amount of tracer that you add is really much smaller, so you can get away with less tracer. The tracer has some radioactivity to it. Even a regular PET scan, it's a very low dose, but if you're concerned about dose, you have something that's maybe more akin to, a cross-country airplane flight, and that's what we're trying to kind of get to. But if you're medically necessary, you could give more and justify it. So if you, are monitoring someone who's unconscious and has a traumatic brain injury, and you want to find out if they're potentially having a stroke, you could give them multiple scans, and you could follow up with them over time with a pretty low dose, and that would be really, really cool.
Yeah. And I have to imagine that changes the cost.
Yes. Yeah, the cost is, I think it's 1.5. I know I haven't priced it out recently, but I think something, at least $1 million for a regular PET scanner, if not 1.5. And, with ours, it's definitely, we're trying to get more at, tenth of that. So.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, I appreciate that breakdown, because I knew there was, sometimes a little word of like, okay, you don't want a PET scan every day, you don't want to be always. And so that's interesting, though, comparing it like the helmet to what you're exposed to in a flight. I wouldn't even have thought of that.
Yeah, but that's, you get, people kind of are afraid of the word radioactivity, but we do get, we go through the, what is the thing?
Like security, yeah.
Yeah, the security, and then on the flight itself, you get cosmic rays, and so you actually, and then you imagine that there are pilots and flight attendants that are getting that exposure all the time, and they really there seems to be no deleterious effect. So we have a little bit of a misunderstanding of that risk in society, I think, but it's to be respected as well. So
sure. Totally. Okay, I promised I'd go to some questions. Someone asked, can Julie share a little more about personality types and practicing mindfulness and meditation? It feels like the brains of changers like her are always on.
That's interesting. With mindfulness, you're working with a sense of quiet. I mean, sometimes it's even called the calm abiding meditation. And if you're, the worst thing that I can do while meditating is have my phone next to me, because
right.
I'm going to pick it up and like, oh yeah, I had this idea. But I think that if you want to be able to, like, developing something from a place of, kind of like calm, like if you've ever, like, actually before we started, I had probably 20 browsers open. And I thought, well, yeah, and then in a way, that's kind of how our brains are if we don't take a little bit of time to, okay, let's reset a little bit. And the breath is a little bit of a boring object. But when we really sit with it, it's not as boring as we would think it would be. It's actually, each time we breathe, it's fresh, it's new, and there's something kind of pleasing about the act of meditation. It can be frustrating at times. It can be, you can feel like you're not settling down. And I think you have different types of people who, maybe they're just kind of easygoing nature to begin with, and it's very natural for them to just slip right in there, and then maybe over time some people just need a little bit of time, and then all of a sudden within 20 minutes or so they're like in the zone. And so you definitely, maybe different personality types, it's like easier right away, and other ones it's like, wow, once I'm in the zone, I'm there. And so I think that's important to recognize.
Yeah, and again, to their point, it's right in the world of entrepreneurs and folks that are trying to change things, solve big problems, and there's a lot of stress and activity and lots of hands in different subject areas, and there's a lot of juggling that comes with that. And so I imagine that your experience with some mindfulness and meditation probably has helped you stay more focused and
you sometimes have a misunderstanding, or like, my brain still does that if I just think a little bit more, I'm going to break through. And sometimes that's not what's needed. You need to close the browsers because you have too much RAM. Your computer isn't working very well after a certain amount of time, because those things start to get muddled. And if you kind of cleanse your palate, or whatever analogy you want to use, just having that sense of calm. And I would also say that the compassion element of connecting with your sense of purpose and what could really benefit the world helps bring entrepreneurship into a form that can be like improve the world. And so that's I think also an element, like a really important element, I think.
Totally. I think a lot of what inspires us to keep working with all of amazing entrepreneurs like you is that so many have a real hunger to certainly to solve a problem in the world. And it's really to keep progressing the world forward through then a really, an effective market opportunity. And the intersection of those things is like very exciting, because it gets things done, and it also but creates room for new and better things. Okay, I have another question. What impact could your research have on people with stress disorders like PTSD, or maybe children with behavioral disorders?
Well, this is really interesting. With PTSD, sometimes if somebody is having an episode, remaining still and being alone in a scanner is a really not so good thing. But there is a dearth of studies in terms of, it's a really important topic. You have a lot of people who are experiencing PTSD, and it's really difficult to study at the same time. So I would think to be able to actually be wearing the PET helmet during a therapy session, and even if somebody, I mean, imagine you're trying to like deal with and express emotion and remain completely still and lying on your back versus being able to talk and to be able to gesture and show emotion. Those things would really make a difference. And you could really see like, well, what therapies are really working and what's happening at different stages of the therapy and with children. So another thing with ADHD or with other disorders in children, those are extremely understudied with PET because of the radioactivity dose. If you can have something that has 1/10 of that dose, you're able to, there are some PET studies, but you would be able to maybe justify a little bit more being able to study how different therapies are working with, because there, when I was talking about dopamine, you have and serotonin, you want to know what those brain chemicals are doing with the different types of medications. And it's a little bit of a black box. It works counterintuitively. How someone with ADHD, how a child responds to ADHD medications is different than an adult. And there's even an ethical dilemma in that, and you'll hear this from NIH, et cetera, that you exclude children because you're afraid of working with them, and then you're giving them medications that were only tested in adults. So you know what I mean? So finding out how these work in the brains of children and being able to do that safely, I think this could potentially bring that into the world. This is maybe not one that, but the other one is epilepsy. And one of the pediatric neurosurgeons that I interviewed as part of the I-Corps interviews mentioned that like adults, before doing a resection surgery for epilepsy, where they take out part of the brain that's a seizure focus, it's really hard to take out a little bit of the brain without fearing you might take out language or fearing, something that they need. And so he said we do it kind of blind, because in an adult, you can now use fMRI and ask the adult to do these tasks. Under age 11, they basically can't get these kids to talk, do these activities in the scanner because they're too young to be able to follow the directions or to stay still or whatever. Here you could put this on their head. You could map out their brain pre-surgically and avoid the language areas. And so he's like, it would just be wonderful to be able to scan kids.
Yeah. No. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, we have time for like one more, and then I'll also open it up that some questions may kind of roll in on the comments, and Julie, if you ever want to go back and
sure,
people know your thoughts in the comments, you can, or we'll certainly also keep an eye on that. But one was, how much of a part have engineers and product designers had in the design of the PET helmet?
Oh, I mean, when we did the NIH Brain Initiative grant, I was the only neuroscientist. So we had physicists, we had electrical engineers, we had mechanical prototyping engineers. It was. I was a PI, and then there was sort of a circle of different engineering experts. We haven't really gotten to the product design in terms of like creating something that's beautiful and marketable. All functionality is where we're at right now, and I think that the next stage would then, encompass someone. Okay, let's create a beautiful, safe-looking package that patients would look at and be like, yeah, I want that on my head. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mention the COVID-19 one, where we're kind of wondering if it could work, with the same with the ICU. Could we, take it into a COVID ward so that you didn't have to take infectious patients into, because they also sometimes can suffer from stroke from changes with the inflammation. And, could you avoid having to bring an infectious patient into a scanning facility, which takes so much time and personnel. So
yeah, it almost becomes like, how do you narrow on the applications? Because it does, it feels like they just overflow of where this could help bring things along. But it is exciting, and it sounds like you all have really found some critical places where it could make huge differences, and then begin to reach, those of us who are burgeoning meditators and learning about mindfulness.
Yeah, that was the original desire. I'm like, that was always a thing, meditating lying down and super still is not natural for, so like, that was actually the original intent. But it's like maybe sometime those two things will come back together. So, or yoga, or being able to do yoga postures. Anyway.
Full circle. Well, thank you so much for chatting today. Feel free if there's anything you want to leave folks with for now. Otherwise, we will just, thank you. And like I said, maybe see you in the comments if folks left some questions that we didn't get to today. But it's been a total pleasure. And
thank you,
I might go find a few minutes to meditate here before my next meeting.
Right, I actually have a little, and I can go out with a little chime.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Julie.
Take care and have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye.